Bryan Snyder, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me, Ryan. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. I want to start with a period in your life where you were actually away from the sport. Is it true you got your PhD in some type of wrestling with an inner city program?
Yeah, I left the sport altogether in 2006. I got into grad school for sociology at CU Boulder. So I moved to Colorado, lived in Denver, moved to Colorado to be an environmental sociologist. My first year or so there was one of the guys that had gone there to study with had left, and I felt myself kind of veering away from environmental sociology. And the grad students and the professors learned a little bit about my wrestling history. I was kind of quiet about it, and they said, "Hey, listen, there's very few pieces of independent or unique research with wrestling in sociology. Most of it's on like pro wrestling, things like that, but actually like amateur, scholastic, freestyle or folk style wrestling, nothing." So they challenged me to go into that space. And one of the biggest hurdles when you do any sort of research is, can you get entree into the world you're trying to study, right? And here I was, I could get into any room in the country if I wanted to. So I took a year and I learned a different literature, and then I did my dissertation research in an inner city high school wrestling with an inner city high school wrestling program in Denver. So so that's that. That was I went there to be an environmental sociologist and a hippie, and I came out a wrestling coach.
I love it, man. You moved to Colorado, getting into the environment. Now, what were you studying with your PhD? Were you studying like how wrestling impacted people, or?
Yes, it was just very basic sociological questions about like group identity, membership, meaning. For me, it was a couple questions. So I wanted to look at, the culture of wrestling, just especially at in a school where wrestling was. It was in a school where basketball was king. Inner city school basketball was king, and so I really wanted to see like kind of how the wrestlers made sense of themselves in relation to other students on campus, in relation to like the larger world around them too. Wrestlers are kind of insular in a way. They kind of form their identity in a small group, and a lot of times they define themselves in relation to other people, right? So like the whole thing is like basketball players are soft, wrestlers are hard, right? And all that stuff. So I explored some of those themes, and it was great. It was really, it changed the way I saw the sport. It's kind of fitting that I ended up doing my dissertation research on wrestling because it's been such a big part of my life. But I saw what it was like I saw what wrestling could do at like the most foundational level to like help someone, because most of the kids that came into the room were, it was their first time they ever stepped in a wrestling room. A lot of them didn't have wrestling shoes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them came from rough neighborhoods, came from maybe unstable family structure. And so to see the head coach really pour his heart and soul into them and just see what wrestling could do. You've heard, I mean, we've all lived it, just in terms of committing to something, doing something with your teammates, learning how to fail, learning how to win gracefully, just learning the value of hard work and pulling yourself up when you get knocked down. And so I saw those things that you sometimes take for granted a little bit when you move up the ranks in wrestling, to kind of have a little bit of a reset and bring me back down to the fundamental level of the sport. It was actually it was life-changing for me because I saw it differently. It was great. It was a really enriching experience in my life that I spent 10 months there as they call participant observation, but I was basically an assistant wrestling coach, and I would go to practice. If you just saw me from the sidelines, you would just think I was a coach. I would go home, I would write all my notes up, type them up that night. You're supposed to, they say the good rule of thumb is you spend as much time taking field notes or writing up your notes as you do actually in the setting. So I'd go home and spend another hour and a half writing up notes for that. And obviously you go it like anything, you go into it with some topics and some themes that you're looking to explore. But just like anything, some new stuff comes up. So I was looking for things, I was writing notes on them, and then other things would come up, and then explore those later.
Wow.
But it was cool. I took the bus to, I just kind of felt like I wanted to kind of get into what it was like to be in Denver. And a lot of the kids took the bus. So took the bus to work out every day, and had a kid actually live with me for about 4 months. So it was really immersive.
Really?
So it wasn't just like you're doing your research and then you're out. Obviously you get into wrestling and it's like you can never leave anything in the room, right? The losses are way too hard, But yeah, I had a young man that lived with me for about 4 months. Yeah, so it was quite the journey.
And so you're going to like the tournaments on the weekends, these Colorado tournaments, and going to all of it. Wow.
Yeah. A couple people like second take, just had to like, are you Bryan Snyder? Like, yeah. It was great. It was good. Early mornings, bus rides, and up in the mountains, and a lot of stuff in the city. There's a lot of wrestling programs in the city, so it was good.
So how long did it take you to write up the dissertation after that year in the room?
So just kind of get my bearings here a bit. So I did when I finished my dissertation. I went to Boulder and I finished my dissertation research my third year there. So that was like 2008, 2009 school year. And then being in the room made me realize like, hey, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to get back in the room. I want to get back into wrestling. And that's when Sean Charles had just got the job at Arizona State. So we talked and he recruited me to come be his head assistant. And I talked to my dissertation committee in Boulder, and I said, hey, listen, this is a really good opportunity. And they gave me their blessing to write my dissertation from off campus because I was done with my comprehensive exams. All I had to do was write my dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at Arizona State for a year working on it. But then that spring, there was an opening at Nebraska, and Coach Manning recruited me back. So I came back to Nebraska the next year. And because I had started at Nebraska, I started my dissertation. They call it your program of study. From the time you put that in to the time it expires is 8 years. So I technically got my PhD from Nebraska, even though all my dissertation research and my comprehensive exams were from Boulder. So I came back, and then I graduated in 2012. So it took me about, there was a time where I wrote for a lot of it when I was in Arizona. And then I took a little bit of a hiatus when I came back. So probably, a good year and a half writing it,
Man, that's hard to stay motivated that long because like when you first do it in Colorado, you're probably very motivated. Everything's fresh, but then you get the chance to coach at the big levels again. You're super busy. Then you go to Nebraska, JB's there. Like, man, there must've been a lot going on during that time.
Yeah, it was tough. Luckily, I'm an early riser, so I could go in and get work done at the coffee shop before the day started, and then hammer away at it at night. To be honest with you, there was a time where I didn't know if I was going to finish it. I switched committee members in Boulder, and I just didn't have the best experience, like writing it from afar. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. And then a friend of mine that was still in grad school here at Nebraska talked to Julia McQuillan, who was the chair of the department, and who actually came into Nebraska like the same time I came in when we were undergrad. She came in as a professor. So we just had a good relationship. And she said, you tell Bryan to get a hold of me. There's no way he's not finished in his PhD, his dissertation. So I talked to Julie, and she's like, listen, your area is not exactly lined up with my area, but a lot of times the most important thing with your dissertation chair is like fit. Like, can you guys work together? Can you guys mesh? She's like, I'll walk you through this. I'll help you through this. You're going to do it. And she's just like, in the world of academia at that level, there aren't many like mentors like her. Mm-hmm. She gets it. She gets like the coaching mentorship. So I gave Julia a big shout out in my the opening page of my dissertation. Just without her, I probably wouldn't have done it. But yeah, she's still a good friend of mine. We have coffee, and so
Dang,
you
that's
always need
cool.
those folks in your life to kind of keep you on track when you're starting to think differently about what you want to do with your life. You need someone to come in and say, hey, you're not finishing.
Right.
So yes.
Well, it has to be similar to jumping gears here, but 2016, the great Jordan Burroughs doesn't get it done in Rio, and by all accounts, he took it right on the chin. When you went over to see him the first time back in Nebraska, what was that experience like?
Well, I mean, it was tough. I mean, I was with him in his hotel room. I think we're actually in Rich Bender's hotel room when he lost to Godoyev. He was just crushed. There weren't many words shared. Just try to give him a little bit of encouragement to wrestle back and finish strong. JB definitely did some soul searching after 2016. My message to him was, hey, you're not going to find a staff that's more committed to your development, right? This year didn't go according to plan, but I think that this is the best place for you to continue your career. And just let them know that that we loved them, we were going to be there for them no matter what. But that was really it. It was a tough time for him.
Well, I mean, it's much more extreme than you not finishing your PhD, but I mean, by all accounts, if you read that letter he wrote, he almost retired. I'm sure you guys were not convincing him not to, but saying, hey, if you want to keep going, we're here for you. So
yeah,
man, I mean, think about all the experiences you've been through. And it all started with you being a part of this high school program, because were you pretty much content on not getting back into wrestling when you got to Colorado? Like you were done with it?
Yeah, my intention was I was going to go in academia. I was going to get my PhD in sociology and just be a professor. And that was it.
Wow.
Just, yeah, that was, there's things I love about academia. I love the intellectual challenge of like trying to figure something out. I like a little bit of the autonomy of, you teach your classes, but in a lot of ways, you're your own boss. You set your week, you can hustle, you can, what paper are you going to write? What project are you going to work on? So I liked all that.
Mm-hmm.
But the intellectual challenge mainly was my biggest attraction to get into academia.
Man. Well, it's like,
yeah, but I was content with, I was going to be out of it, just be a fan.
wow. And then once you got back in, you were at Arizona State for a year. You end up back in Nebraska. What was like the tipping point to get you back in Lincoln, Nebraska?
I mean, I knew when Manning texted me that I was going to go back. I think I just, there's something special about being able to coach at your alma mater. And I really love Nebraska. I mean, I've spent more years of my life in Nebraska than anywhere else at this point. So I knew it. This place is really special. It's a great place to work. A lot of people, one of the special things about Nebraska is a lot of the people that went to school here work here. A lot of the people that work here when I was here still work here. So it's wow. It's a really awesome community to work in. We have the training table where not just the athletes eat, like the whole athletic department eats. So it's cool. It's great. Yeah, I knew when Manning texted me that it was just going to be, we were going to make it work one way or another.
And what year were you when Manning first got to Nebraska from UNI?
So I was in between my sophomore and junior year. So I had 2 competitive years left. So he got me for my junior and senior year.
What was your first impression of Coach Manning?
But if I remember this correctly, we back in the day, we used to have this little exchange with Korea, with South Korea, where like my freshman year, the highest placing member of the Big 12 went on a team, and we went over to Korea. We went over to Seoul, and we wrestled in their university nationals. The next year, they came to Norman, Oklahoma, and we didn't do a tournament, but we did a dual meet, right? Mm-hmm. So it was a Big 12. It was a Big 12 deal. So me, Beckerman, and Varing were all on the team that went to Norman, and I swear that Manning got named on our way back, and he was there at the terminal when we got off the airplane. So like we're hearing this, like Coach Manning's our new coach, and this and that, and then we walk off the airplane, and there he is. So
oh my God.
we got a lot of workouts in that summer. You know what the summer's like. It's a crazy transition for him. Half our mats are rolled up for camps, but I remember us. I remember him being very like eager to get to work. Wanting to get to know me, eager to get to work, and obviously we were similar size, so we wrestled a lot. He claims he kicked my butt the first time we wrestled. I remember a little differently, but but we definitely scrapped a lot. We had a good summer, and that was the year that Brands was wrestling at the Olympics.
Mm-hmm.
So Brands was on the new staff, if I remember correctly, right? So, yeah, so it was 2000. Brands was on the new staff, and I got to actually train with Terry a little bit as he was prepping for the Olympics.
Wow, I forgot he was there that year.
Yeah, yep, he was there that year. So that was an awesome experience for me. I remember my shoulder was hurt, and I was like taking some time off, and I'm like, there's no way I'm not going to train with Terry Brands for the Olympics. I'm like, I'm done not training. Like I need to get in here and get this experience. And I just remember Terry warming up in like tons of sweats, and then basically like, all right, let's just scrap, which is what kind of my favorite workout. It's like, let's get warm and then let's just scrap.
Wow.
So
what
it was an interesting summer.
What kind of feel was Terry bringing back then?
I mean, the same. He was very stingy, relentless. He was obviously a lot smaller than me. And I commend him. He tried to put on some weight, he's trying to get bigger like that after the Olympics in that year, because we trained a lot together. But it was great. He was really tough. I could get through him on a few double legs just because I was bigger, but
Mm-hmm.
he would run me down a little bit. It was awesome. It was I grew up having like 2 VHS wrestling tapes. I think there's only like 2 available. One was like Competitor Supreme with Gable,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was like this one that the Brands brothers did with them like training out and and running these roads or whatever. So like for me,
I know what you're talking about. No one knew what I was talking about. I found it on like a reseller website. It's like TNT, the Tom and Terry Brand story, and it starts with them running down a dirt road. I know exactly. I actually have it in my closet because no one else remembers that one. Everyone knows Competitor Supreme, but dude, that one was epic. Yes.
Yeah. So I watched that, and like growing up for me, like it was the Brands brothers because they were kind of iconic throughout the country. And then it was Colot because Colot, growing up in Pennsylvania,
Wow.
he did the backflip in the state finals, and everyone was like, I don't know if you remember that when the guy had his leg up and he did the backflip and came underneath like a scorpion. And yeah, so those are my guys.
How crazy. All right, so I'm glad you brought that up because I'm an Illinois guy. I've heard about that story from afar, never saw it. The legend of Colot in PA back in the 90s must have been out of this world.
Yeah. Yeah, he could do, he was placing at Midlands when he was in college, in high school. He was the guy. He was almost like godlike in Pennsylvania, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was like I think he was like a full 4 or 5 years ahead of me. So he was the guy that we would always look up to. Yeah. So yeah, and I was actually able to train with Colot too. Because when I came back in between summers, I'm really close to Lehigh. And I was, I got a good connection with Pat Santoro. He was training for the Olympic trials. Colot was at Lehigh for a little bit. So I was like, when I would come home, Pat would invite me up to Lehigh. I lived on the south side of Easton. I was literally like 10, 15 minutes from Lehigh's gym.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go up there and work out with those guys. So I was really fortunate to be able to train and scrap with the guys that I grew up looking up to.
Wow. That is really cool. I mean,
yeah,
people talk about those Colot workouts back then. He would just be like he would go on the assault bike for like an hour at a time. I mean, just wrestle and drill for hours. I mean, the guy was relentless.
Yes.
Wow. That's cool because, Easton, PA, legendary in Pennsylvania, and Coach Powell from that program, he's like also a larger than life figure. How did you, I guess your dad was a coach, so that's how you got into wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But like, how did you get first introduced to Coach Powell from the Easton program?
So Mr. Powell was the head coach. My freshman year, I was JV. I was the assistant coach's kid, but I was JV. I was behind Gary Root, and then I was behind Jamar Billman at the end because Jamar dropped down to I was a 103 pounder.
Wow.
So, just getting introduced to Coach Powell, he was the guy, he was a hard ass. There was no gray area. It was black and white. I've come to respect Coach Powell's policies so much as I gotten older and I've become a coach. Obviously he used to piss us off back in the day, with like, we got to do this again. It was like we would wrestle like 3 matches 3 days out, 2 matches 2 days out, 1 match went, like every week was the same. No one could leave the day before a competition. No one could leave unless they were within 1 pound of their weight. And there was one exception to it. I was like cutting so hard to make weight at the end of my sophomore year because I had to cut down to 105. It was 103 plus 2 my sophomore year to make the lineup in state. And I remember I was just miserable. And it was either that or the time I went down my junior year to wrestle 119 or 121 at Reno. It was one of those 2 years that there was one exception. He let me leave practice, me being more than 1 pound overweight, but I had to run home. So he let me leave more than a pound over, but he said, yeah, but you got to run home. I lived about 3 miles from the high school. So I guess it was a wash in his mind.
Those were some of his policies. Like you had to leave a pound over. What else do you remember?
He was very egalitarian in that we had these 2 Easton restroom used to just be like 2 rooms separated, and there was a wall and there was 1 walkway through it. One of them was the JV room, one of them was the varsity room. But one locker room was significantly more sought after than the other, right? And it used to be like, well, it's just the seniors that kind of stay in there. But really, Mr. Powell set up a competition. So based on, how we always did a run, we always did these like fitness tests before at the beginning of the year. And based on how you finished in those, you could pick your lockers. And so I remember we were kind of the turning of the guard when me and Billman and Willie and like some of the younger guys that really put Easton on the map when we went on the run, we kind of won our spots and took some of those lockers away from the seniors. They didn't like it much, but we said, this is how it's going to be. He was good though. He was a junkie, a wrestling junkie. He was, he had a million techniques. He worked us really hard. One of the things I value a lot from Coach Powell is that I remember that like, no matter where we were at, technically or whatever, but I knew at the end of the year, like we were going to be the best conditioned team. Like he was going to have us ready. I mean, Coach Powell takes pride. I still call him Mr. Powell. Mr. Powell takes pride in that in all the years he was at Easton, he never had an undefeated dual meet team. So he always wanted to seek out at least during my time, up until my time there, but he always wanted to seek out the best competition for us, which is why we went to like the first Ironman and back then it was Ironman and it was Reno. We didn't have Beast to the East back then, but Ironman and Reno were it. We wrestled those, and sometimes they were back-to-back weekends. If anything, they were 2 weekends apart. And then we did all that before we even got into our district, our conference tournament, our conference competition. And if you remember back then, it was like us, Nazareth, and Northampton. We were all ranked in the top 15, 20 in the country, and we would wrestle them in a dual meet. Then we would wrestle them in district duels. And then we would wrestle them at districts, and then we would wrestle them at regionals, and we would wrestle them at state tournament.
Oh my
so,
God.
It was a gauntlet. I remember a guy named Denny Liberto, who was a senior when I was a sophomore. He beat me and Billman. Like I think his record against us was like 11-1 or 10-1. Like we couldn't crack him. He was a Northampton guy. He used to kick our butts.
What kind of a specimen was Jamar Billman back in the day?
Ultimate competitor. I mean, he was a very hard worker. His dad always used to take us and lift with us in the summer. We used to do these like crazy lifting workouts. We used to do like crazy conditioning workouts. Like I always say that Jamar's dad, Dwayne Thornton, was like the strength and conditioning coach before strength and conditioning coaches got like in vogue, right? He was badass. We loved it. We would do crazy stuff. Then he'd take us back to his house and he'd cook us pancakes and eggs and everything. He was awesome. But he worked really hard, but he was just a competitor. Like he wanted to wrestle anyone. Like we used to fight over the guys. If we were going to wrestle a team and there was a ranked guy, like who was going to wrestle? That was the stuff. That was just kind of the attitude and the culture that we had at Easton at that time. Yeah. So ultra competitive. And just really scrappy. Like if you were going to beat Jamar, you were going to earn it. And you remember him, his freshman year, true freshman year, he wrestled out of the gate for Penn State, and he was some crazy like 11-10 matchups with Jeff McGinnis, who was I think he was a national champ that year. Oh no, he was the defending. He was a returning national champ. Wasn't the defending national champ.
Because he sat out in '97.
Yeah. So I actually wrestled McGinnis that year too. So he in an open tournament at UNI, I think I wrestled him. So he gave me one of my early whoopings as a college guy. But yeah, I mean, you just saw Jamar. You know, he's this true freshman kid. He's wrestling in Carver Hawkeye Arena, and he's wrestling a national champ, Jeff McGinnis, and he's toe to toe with him. You know, so he was special. Yeah.
Did he went to Penn State? Then did he transfer?
Yeah, there? He finished his career at Lock Haven.
Okay.
Kind of did what Colott did.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, and those. So the year you once stayed in Pennsylvania, he was a weight above you, or a couple weights.
He was
up?
40, and he was 40, and I was 35. He was one above me.
Oh my God, what a murderous row! And yeah, you look back at those teams, you know, the Easton teams during the late '90s, early 2000s. Nationally ranked, just studs. And you know, you talk about how tough PA tournament was. You look at your quarterfinal matchup that year. Didn't you have like the number 1 ranked or number 2 ranked guy in the state your senior year, right in the quarters?
Yeah. So at PA States, there's 5 when I was there's 5 regional champs, right? And how you separate the 16-man, it's a 20-man bracket now, but back then how you separated the 16-man bracket was, well, you separated the 5 regional champs, but 2 of those champs got to wrestle in the quarters, right?
Right.
There's 5 champs, right? So, and none of it was seeded. It was all based on just Northeast Regional 1 wrestles this, all that, right? So it just happened that me and Mark Hoffer wrestled in the quarters, and he was beating me. I remember I got a takedown with like 11 seconds to go to go up by a point. It was a low scoring match. I think it was only 4-3 at that time. And I remember we went out of bounds. There was like 4 seconds left, and I'm sitting there to myself going, how am I going to ride this guy for 4 seconds? Like I also was kind of a knucklehead at that point. Like I went out, like I'm sitting there thinking the night before the match, I'm in my hotel room. I know I had a big match. I'm like, did I do enough to win this match? And it's like small time thinking, right? So I'm thinking, you know what? I need to go earn this. So like I went out on a run and like midnight that night, you know?
Thinking you're going to move the needle ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to move the needle then. When, you know, what was going to move the needle the most that night was to like sleep well, you know, have the courage to rest and get up and like go let it fly.
Right.
So yeah, it was a very stressful tournament. I mean, I think I won, you know, in the semis, it was close to maybe a point. And I finally I had a little bit of breathing room in the finals, but I never wrestled the state tournament in Pennsylvania well. I would, you know, I remember my junior year, I won my senior year, I won Ironman and Reno pretty easily. And then I'm scrapping for my life in the quarterfinals of the state tournament. Oh man. But yeah, he was tough.
And like that, you know, knowing how tough PA is, you know, a 5th placer there, you know, is probably more than a state champ in most states. So did the college coaches know that and you were getting calls, or did you have to win at your senior year to get some solid offers?
I think my junior year really hurt me. I don't know if I was ranked in the top 3. We had a pretty tough weight class. Rob Loper, Pat Netsky was in there. And so me and Loper wrestled in the semifinals, and it was overtime, and he beat me in overtime, and he went on to win a state championship. I lost, feeling sorry for myself, got beat again in Conci semis, and then I'm taking 5th. So I think that hurt me because I think some schools got off me. And so that's the end of my junior year. Fall rolls around, and you know, I took some visits. I was a 2-time state place winner. I was JV my freshman year, so I placed my sophomore and junior year, 4th and 5th. And then, you know, I took some visits, and I hadn't quite found the school for me. And so I just said, you know, I'm going to wait till after my year. I'm going to sign late. I'm going to sign in March or whatever. It was April.
Yeah.
And that's when Nebraska got a hold of me. I think Nebraska got a hold of me after Ironman. That's also when Oklahoma State recruited me a little bit, I think during Reno. So it was good. I was, you know, it just took me a while. I had to, you know, wrestle better, and I ultimately found Nebraska, which was great.
Yeah, and that's before the Big Ten days. So you're out in the Big 12, and it just seems like now with with the state of the Big 12, it's like just such a blessing that Nebraska's in the Big 10, because it adds so much more fun to the conference. And I mean, throw you guys in the mix. It's like every weekend it's just crazy. But
Yeah.
man, back then it was Big 12 for you guys, though, right?
Yep. Back then was Big 12, and really, I mean, there was 5 schools. It was us, Missouri, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State. Now they were all really tough. Missouri, Coach Smith had just got to Missouri, I think halfway through my career. So they were, they were down a little bit before he got there. But Iowa State was tough. Oklahoma was tough. Oklahoma State was obviously tough, and so we scrapped with those guys a lot.
Were you surprised when the previous coach left for Manning, or was it kind of expected that there was going to be a change?
Yeah, there's some stuff went on. This was some compliance stuff. So we knew, by the end of the year that something was going to happen. Yeah. So it wasn't, it was sudden. Yeah. But we knew something was up.
Man, to have Manning come in, though, that guy's energy is just unbelievable. And, he was coming in hot off of taking you and I from oblivion to, a top recruiting class. So, and then, you build your career there, 4-time All-American, 2-time NCAA finalist. I just can't believe that you left and then you come back. And man, what a time to come back, because Jordan Burroughs, was he a senior or a junior at that time?
He was a senior. He was, he was a senior.
Had you put your hands on him before that, or was that your first time?
No, one time. So I come back. I came back. I don't know what it was. Came back to Lincoln once while Jordan was still a 49-pounder. Came back and worked out with the guys, and we scrapped a little bit, and I got 2 quick ankle picks on him, right? And then he started to turn the heat up on me a little bit, and then Manning kind of called to go and gave me a little bit of help, so that was good, because I was just I was like, I was living in Denver. I was like 160 pounds, but yeah, you can ask JB about it. I stung him with a couple quick ankle picks. He was leading that right leg really heavy. And then when I came back,
go ahead. Yeah, no,
but then when I came back, JB was, he had coming off knee surgery. He was really big. He hadn't worked out in a lot, but he was like 180 pounds. He was a monster. So I would have loved to, usually when you come in, it would have been nice to get JB when he came in as a freshman, so that I could kind of like get in his head a little bit, but no such thing.
And he won it that year, obviously. And then that summer, the legendary match with Sargouche at the Worlds, the match that kind of started, his run. And you could even say Team USA's dominance, and what an era we're living in right now. But man, the Nebraska website has it right there. First world champ since 2006, which is crazy to think that in 2011 it had been that long. Now we have them dime a dozen, but
yeah.
Talk us through that, your memory of that match with Sargouche at the 2011 Worlds.
I remember watching it from, I was in the background, or, in the warm-up room, and then we could kind of sneak out a little bit. But it was just insane because it was such a dogfight, but Sargouche was cheating. He kept grabbing JB singlet,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it was kind of sneaky what he was doing. I do it a lot in practice now, you just kind of like leave your hand over top, and then when it's time to go, you pull it and go. But, I remember JB winning. I knew, JB at that point was starting to develop, this ultimate, like, you're going to have to kill me to beat me. He had this grit to him. That was just like, it's unmatched. I've never seen anything like it. And then it just grew and grew and grew over the years, but he started to develop that. And so I saw him, he went toe to toe with Sargouche, and we came back, and, there was a lot of celebration, but I think then somebody was like, hey, listen, like, we're here to win the thing, right? Like, let's not celebrate too much. Mm-hmm. And so he kind of just got him, he was happy. We were all pumped, and Sargouche was a defending 2-time champ, right? At that point, he won it the 2 prior years, I believe, so he was, but it was just exciting. That was like, hey, damn right I arrived, like he was ready to go. And it didn't get any easier because he had to wrestle Aliyev, I think. I don't know if it was the next match or maybe there was one in between there. But He was chest wrap. There was a controversy. It could have went either way, and JB got the call. But JB was doubling him, and he was chest wrapping JB.
Oh, wow! So that Sargouche match was really early in the tournament. Must have been the quarters.
It was second match.
Second match. Wow.
Second match, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
And was that when they were doing it all in one day? Or
I think so.
They had some weird stuff.
Yeah, because it was day before weigh-ins, and I think they just ran it all the way through. And then he wrestled Godarzi in the finals, who I felt pretty good with, because he was like kind of wrestled like me, like blocky left leg lead. You know, JB had felt that for so long. You know, it's like he was good with that. You know, didn't have to game plan much, just do what he does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. I remember I was actually watched when he won his world championship. I was like right next to John Smith, and he was like hitting me on my back. Like he was like, you know, it was pretty cool to see, like, you know, John cheering so hard for, you know, he had a dog in the fight. It was a US guy, but it was cool. It was pretty awesome. That was, I would say that was his grittiest world championship, you know?
Yeah, no, that was man, and Sargouche, JB said this in this podcast, like Sidakov seems like a nice guy. He's like, Sargouche was like a real enemy that you could hate a little bit. Like he was dirty. Yeah. He was doing some shady stuff out there. And you really enjoyed hating that guy. I did, at least.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, it's like the refs over there, they're so jaded, and, you know, like, I guess, I mean, yeah, they're bad, right? But some of them are bad, but they're stopping Sargouche and telling him, like, the singlet, and JB's like, my singlet, it's ripped. You know how hard it is to rip a singlet? Those things are made of, you know, they're tightly woven. You know, you're just saying, hey, stop warning them, stop talking about it, take the point. But, you know, I think it's great. Against all odds, JB just kept his cool and ran him down.
Yeah. I mean, then look at it now. He just won his 7th this year. And when you look at, you know, the impact on many things has been talked about, but like, how has it impacted your coaching coming in and seeing the progression from 2011 to now?
It's been great. You know, I learned a lot from JB. You know, I was just getting back into coaching. Really, it was my second year after my little bit of a hiatus there. It's just, you know, to have a guy like that you work so closely with, you get to see the standard he sets, and you can, I mean, he sets the ultimate standard. And so it was really nice just to have him as a bar for what it's like if you want to be the best. You know, I always tell, you know, we make, you know, there's those guys that are like ultra hardworking, and then you have those guys that are like maybe really hardworking, but then they fall off a little bit in competition. Then you have the other guys that they might not work that hard, and when it's competition time, they show up, like the Iversons of the world. Like, are we talking about practice, or are we talking about scrapping? But like when you get both, when you get someone that's completely determined or dedicated to their craft, works their butt off, and they have a tremendous amount of courage, you get a guy like JB. You sprinkle in his, you know, his athleticism and his toughness, and, you know, it's all the ingredients to make the GOAT, which I truly believe JB is now. You know, he's just what he's done. It's like, it's head scratching. You know, it's pretty amazing.
Especially if you look at the guys he was keeping out of Team USA, how good they are. Like, we always knew David Taylor and Dake were awesome, but now you see they're the best in the world. Not by a landslide. They're rolling people, and that's JB's competition for so many years there.
I actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I say that a lot. I see that that's one of the things that, you know, will be like a trivia question later in life, is like, you know, who, you know, name the guys that JB kept off the team. But, you know, his weight class was so deep for so long, you know, and as soon as those guys made the team, they won a world championship, you know, and like you said, they were rolling. You know, and not to mention guys like Andrew Howe, who Jordan had some wars with. You know, I mean, I think Andrew Howe, if he would have made a team, he would have medaled. You know, can you imagine a couple of those, you know, Eastern European guys having to wrestle Howe for 6 minutes?
Dude, the guy, it's funny you say that, because I was just talking to Coach Brian Medlin last week, and I saw a picture of JB in the camo singlet, which is when he wrestled Aymar. And I was like, man, that Aymar series, that was crazy. And Aymar is a guy I would have loved to see at his prime internationally as well, because he had such an explosive style.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Always another, you know, always knew it was going to be a dogfight with Aymar as well.
Yeah.
JB never, I mean, think
about how many guys he's gone through, though. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, Howe was like the guy for a while, then he went into coaching. Aymar, you know, took a match off JB. Not many people have done that. And then he kind of falls off. Like, JB never falls off the training. It's like crazy. He's just so consistent.
Incredible. He's got, he's very consistent. Obviously, he lives his life really well. His diet's on point. He's not a party or any of that stuff. So that's helped with the longevity of him. He's just dialed in. He's just to see his growth off the mat, happening really, really side by side. With his growth on the mat. He just started to figure everything out.
Yeah.
And it just, you see things like spiral downwardly, and then you also see it snowball in the right direction, and that's what it did for JB.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because you had James Green doing it at the same time. They made like 5 or something world teams together. So you guys had it going in Nebraska. Now, the college team, awesome. You guys are rolling. 2020 at the Big Tens at Rutgers, took second. That was so much fun to watch that. I was at that one, and that was a great venue for the Big Tens. Talk to us about your kind of, your current state, your coaching. Where are we at with the team now? Are you guys still in preseason workouts? Are you rolling with in the room practices for the year?
Yeah, we're into our 8 hours. So we can have 8 hours with our guys a week. And so we're on the mat, about 3 organized a week. And then we usually, we encourage our guys to get one in on their own. So we're doing wrestling, we're doing some agility stuff, strength and conditioning, running some stadium stairs, not every week, but lifting, so we're doing some cardio. And we're doing some agility stuff in the sand, some circuit stuff. And then, we're in the room though. We're starting to switch more of our focus to be in the room. October 10th is coming soon. But yeah, it's been, we're just focusing on, skill development, trying to get everyone on the same page. We have a bunch of young guys in our room that are really promising. So it's fun to see those guys pick up, what we're trying to, throw at them. Cool to see, anytime you have that, you got guys climb the ranks, they become juniors and seniors. You see them start to take these young guys under their wing. It's really awesome as a coach. And even as an alumni, I have a lot of pride in this program from a lot of different perspectives, but to see some of our guys grow in their leadership roles, have some skin in the game with their other guys, have some stake in the room, care about what's going on, get on guys, encourage guys, really, really special. And I think that's one of the ingredients that takes a team from good to great is when you have that leadership from within. And we definitely have it. We're a really special team. I love these guys.
Well, it's like you said, if everyone's holding each other accountable, when the new guys coming in, they know that's just the standard. You don't even have to get on their back about that. Yeah. And if you look at it now, like the college wrestling's just better than it's ever been. We're adding women's programs, or the schedules are growing, or the schedules aren't growing. That was my question. When you were a sophomore, you wrestled 42 matches. We'll never see that again. Like maybe you had 42 wins. It was something crazy like that. Why do
46.
you think? Was it 46?
Yeah, I was 43-3 my sophomore year.
Right. So, but the numbers for college wrestling, the fans are there. Everyone's loving it. Why are these guys not wrestling as much?
That's a good question. I mean, I can only really speak to us. In the Big Ten, I don't think it does really well to compete a ton outside of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just the season gets long, and you're into your Big Ten schedule into January and February, and there's quite a few weekends that you're wrestling Friday and Sunday. I just think it's a long, I think for folk style, we've gotten into that just growing up in America, doing kids wrestling a million matches. But if you look overseas, like they don't wrestle as much as we do.
Not even close. Yeah.
Yeah. Not even close. So I don't really know. I think it's, obviously there's something there as to what's going on. I think maybe people are thinking that it's just better for the longevity. I mean, just for their guys when March comes, because really what's most important is, how is our team competing in March? Now, Manning wants to wrestle everybody, every, it's like, hey, let's add Cornell and let's wrestle Oklahoma State. And let's do, I'm like, I get it. I love your competitiveness, but, we should maybe rethink some of those. Well, but, Manning he wants to wrestle everybody. It's great.
Yeah. But I mean, you think back to your era, though, a lot of those guys will tell you, like, overtrained out the wazoo, like so overtrained. It was crazy, especially in the 90s. I mean, Mike Powell, one of the Beat the Street Chicago executive directors, he's like, dude, when we were at Indiana, we were overtrained. Like you can't even believe it. I'm pretty sure that's most programs at that time. And so, too many matches certainly would drain on guys. And now they're coming in so much better as kids too. I don't know if you need that many matches to develop.
That's true. I think that's a good point. Some of these, with where USA Wrestling is and where the regional training centers, like the impact they've had on the next generation of our guys, is that these high school kids are good.
Mm-hmm.
I wrestled with some high school kids this summer, and I'm like, wow. Like I had to scrap. I don't know how many more years I can wrestle with high school kids before they start beating me. But yeah, it's amazing. Our sport is, where we're at as a sport in our country, we are locked and loaded. It's always going to be a dogfight with Russia and Iran and those schools. But look at the guys that are 2 and 3 deep. Look at our junior world champs. We're doing, it's USA Wrestling. Like you were saying, like with JB, like when he was like the first world champ, like that drought we went through, like I can't even imagine that anymore.
It's
There's
unspeakable.
just rolling.
Yeah.
Then you have these 8th graders and 9th graders beating high school kids. I'm like, well, look at those dudes. Like they're going to come through the ranks too.
Man.
So we're in really good hands.
Yeah. Now for sure. And if you look at your program, the one thing I've always loved about Nebraska is that the high school wrestling in the state isn't what you would put in a top 10 state. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but my point is that you guys got to recruit everywhere. You're out in Colorado, you're out in the Dakotas, you're freaking everywhere. And so I was just going to ask, as we sign off here, like I'm curious, when you look at what you're looking for in terms of the person you want to wrestle for Nebraska, what does that look like? Like, what are some of the characteristics you're trying to recruit to the Cornhuskers?
Well, you're absolutely right. Nebraska's getting better, and especially some areas is getting better, but historically, and we don't have the depth and the amount of kids that are coming through Pennsylvania and Ohio and Jersey. But that just puts the onus on us to hustle more. There's really good kids out there. So we look for kids that are, that love the sport, right? That have some resiliency to them, that are raised right, come from good families, and they know the value of right or wrong. They know how to work. They know the value of work. It's guys that have high offensive output, guys that look for competition. If you can get a kid that loves to compete, comes in with a chip on his shoulder, and loves the sport and has no distractions, his ceiling is high, really high. And that's what we want. We want to have that room where we have to kick guys out of the room. It's like, hey, you got to go take a day off. You need a day off. Mm-hmm. So fall in love with the sport. And that if you do that, then you can gain a lot of ground on these guys in college. That's really fits into Manning's blue collar mentality. It's like, hey, we're going to outwork them. We may not get all the number 1 recruits in the country, but we're going to take our guys and we're going to outwork them. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it happen. I've seen walk-ons from Nebraska, Aaron Studebaker, take 5th in the country, and beat some really good guys along the way.
Yeah.
And so so we like that. We like blue collar kids that really want to work and love the sport. With that you can do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have done it, and you get a lot of Isaiah White and Eric Schultz, 2 Illinois guys doing it. So you got my attention, and we're big fans here of your program, and just wish you nothing but the best this season, Coach. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
All right, thanks for having me, Ryan. Anytime, and have a good day.
Thanks, Coach.